Welcome back to part 3 of the story of Vermont. We ended part 2 where the Brits were reinvading and they're going to retake Fort Ticonderoga. Well, the whole Battle of Saratoga. It's a wider scope, but first they try to retake Fort Ticonderoga, and they strategically sneak their cannons up at night to get a commanding position. So the Continentals. So remember, Ticonderoga is actually in New York, the state at that time. So the Vermonters didn't claim anything on the west side of Lake Champlain. So that they might have just ceded the. Oh, and then another fact is that in 1775, apparently, Seth Warner of the Green Mountain Boys got the Continental Army to sanction the Green Mountain Boys as the first Ranger battalion or regiment or whatever of the army. So even though Vermont in July of 1777 constitutes itself as an independent republic, the Green Mountain Boys go on to fight in the military of the Continental Army. So there's this kind of implicit military alliance between the 13 colonies and then Vermont. So, picking up the story from the retreat from Ticonderoga, that was occupied by the Continentals, not the Green Mountain Boys, and as they retreated, they cut down the road. The Green Mountain Boys, one of the aspects of their code is that they all have a hatchet, although I was wrong in the last video saying that they were the ones that were impeding the British after the retreat from Fort Ticonderoga. Essentially, to make a long story short, in this campaign, this 3-part attack of the British, a big army on the southern part, as we went over, ended up going to Philadelphia. A smaller army or detachment on the west fork attack got caught up trying to take some fort, and then the main detachment coming down to attack under General Burgoyne. Then, and one of the aspects of this is it's equally kind of there's a lot of Germans and mercenaries along with these crown forces. So it's not just like the British redcoats. It's like the crown is a corporate monopoly upon the oceanic trade. So it's like a trade monopoly that's enforced by the British crown, but also by all sorts of mercenaries from all these other places that they hire. And a lot of the Germanic ones, I'm pretty sure, are actually tied to the Rothschild Corporation, which made a lot of money selling mercenaries from the continental Europe to whoever wanted to pay for them. So as this large army is invading from the north, they split off a part of it to raid the country of Vermont for supplies. And they were going to go in one area, but because the Vermont had declared independence and started accumulating their valuables, their capital, to support their collective security at Bennington, the redcoats were just attracted to that like moths to a light. They're like, oh look, there's a bunch of resources and capital, let's go steal it, because that's what we do. So the Vermont initiating its independence and creating its capital changed the course of the British Army and drew them into a trap. So they thought they sent 1,000 or 2,000 people in, closer to 1,000, thinking that they would go get supplies, and at the end of the day, they were all captured or killed. Another interesting part of this is, so the forces that in this the Battle of Bennington, where after attrition coming, and the redcoats were engaged at this Battle of Bennington. So, and it was actually outside of Bennington. They didn't actually, and so it's in where the actual battle was is in the modern day state of New York. So the Brits, they tried to invade the capital of Vermont and steal Vermont's stuff, and they couldn't even get into the state. They got defeated like at the doorstep. Like, no, not gonna happen. So the main force that supported Vermont in defense of its capital was actually militia that was raised out of New Hampshire. So General Stark, unless he was a colonel at the time, raised 2,000 militia in the span of 6 days, which was 10% of the male population of New Hampshire. Can you believe that? In less than a week, you rallied 10% of the male population of the state to go defend your neighboring, or it's not even a state at that time, it's a colony, but just of the New Hampshire grants or whatever. No, I mean the colony of New Hampshire, the rebelling crown colony, whatever. So it's the militia of New Hampshire, and as they move towards Bennington, the officers in the Continental Army try to take command of, we'll call him General, I don't know if that was his rank at the time, but of General Stark's force of 2,000 militia from New Hampshire. And he refused, saying that his force was not the Continental Army, his force was the militia of New Hampshire, and he was solely responsible for them. So in a way, that act in and of itself was declaring sort of de facto independence of New Hampshire. Like, no, we're not going to bow to your authority, Continental forces. We have our own authority. So it was basically the militia of New Hampshire and then the Green Mountain Boys of Vermont that together decimated this British force. So the locals of New Hampshire and Vermont, they ended up having casualties of around 70, and the British had like over 900 captured and killed from this devastating defeat for the British. And this is the first of the entire Revolutionary War. Up until this, it's loss, loss, loss. Other than Boston, Boston's like the one, like, oh, look, there's a potential that you could possibly win something, former colonials. And then after that, it's like loss, all these losses, and Washington's retreat. They can't do anything. There's no victories. But Saratoga, or this Battle of Bennington, this is a devastating defeat for the British. They thought they were so mighty, 10-1, destroyed, decimated. Well, decimated is it's like the opposite of decimated. Anyways, so that then leads to the next battle of Saratoga, where then that army, the rest of that army, like 6,000 people or something like that, I might have that number wrong, but ends up being completely captured by the Continental Army after that. So that led to the first victory. So those are the main military contributions that Vermont, as an independent republic, contributed to the American colonies in aid of them achieving their own independence? And with all likelihood, the Continental Army may not have achieved a victory were it not for in their overall war were it not for the Vermonters and their contributions, and their direct fight against the Crown forces, and then also their symbiotic relations with the Continentals, and forming military alliances to establish the first Ranger Battalion of the Army, even before. So, it's all the same continent, but Vermont is an independent country before it became a state. And then, moving on to after all that, so Vermont was then an independent republic for, I should know this number, but over a decade before it joined in union with the other states, the former colonies that became states, maintaining for the most part the boundaries that were established by the maritime law of the Crown. All except for Vermont, of course, where Vermont was independently established of its own border, of its own authority, of the people thereof. And then when Vermont joined the Union of the States, it was added with Vermont and retaining all of its pre-existing status and constitution and rights and everything. Basically just created a political union between the state of Vermont and the Union of former colonial states. One aspect that's important about that is that Vermont's constitution includes acknowledging the inherent right of any people to form their own state out of countries that are unclaimed, out of unclaimed country, or country that they have bought or purchased or established a claim to. So the reason they put this in the Constitution of Vermont, uniquely to any other state's constitution, is because that's how Vermont came to be. It had to establish itself and demonstrate its own right of enacting it, establishment, self-governance, self-constituency, constituting oneself. And by nature of that, anyways, I didn't finish the point, that any people have a right to form their own state in countries that are vacant and that they can purchase or lay claim to. So by nature of that inherent right that is recognized in the Vermont Constitution, that is why Vermont exists as it does. And also that right is acknowledged still in the country, or is not just acknowledged, but it's a real right for all people. It's just only recognized in that original Constitution of Vermont. But it applies to all people, but legally and lawfully in Vermont. So that's what has created the precedent and precluded the creation of the state of Allodium out of vacant, I think it's unclaimed, the exact term, unclaimed country. But without, and so Allodium has a very similar flag, and yet instead of being representing the 13 colonies as stars in the sea of blue, representing maritime law, so the 13 individuated things created out of maritime law that are in the fourth quadrant of the land of Vermont. Allodium shares a similar flag of the three quadrants being the land of Vermont, and then in the fourth quadrant, the singular symbol represents the integrity and ideology and kind of symbology of Allodium. So it integrates, and that's the flag of OG Foundation. Man, I'm losing it. I need to smoke again, I guess. So in the top left quadrant is the symbol of Allodium, which is the state, and then OG Foundation has the three quadrants of Vermont, the country, the state of Allodium in the top left quadrant. And then that exists representing an allodial foundation of Allodium, of which there could be many different foundations of Allodium or of other states, whether in the country of Vermont or the continent of that which is Vermont is the country of. I'm expanded. End of the video. End of part 3. I don't know what else is relevant. Sorry that the quality of part 3 went down, but my energy level has gone down. It's the end of the day, and I've lost interest about telling the story of Vermont for today. So until I have any more to add to that story, that can just give a little bit of background about Vermont's history, how it was a unique republic formed from the law of the land as opposed to the 13 colonies and the United States, which were formed out of the colonies were formed out of maritime law, and then the United States was reinstituting those colonies under the law of the land. So then the 13 colonies formed a union with the Republic of Vermont, or the United States ended up forming a union with the Republic of Vermont, so that the state of Vermont became one of the states in the Union of States while retaining all of its status that it had retained as the Republic of Vermont, which also had originated the Ranger battalion of the Army, which is the most elite infantry division of the Army, and directly contributed to the independence of the United States. And that legacy and that foundational law of Vermont is still in place and can be utilized for the common benefit of the people today. So that's the end of part 3. It'll be a long time before there's another part. If there's another part, and it would probably just be an addendum of these, but this is the main body of just what I wanted to share. It's just the way that Wikipedia will tell it, depending on where you're looking, you have to cross-reference many different sources, but the way Wikipedia tells it, they'll erase Vermont from the whole story, essentially, and they'll just say that it was all the Continental Army. They won't recognize the the fact that the only reason the British went to Bennington was because that was the capital of Vermont, where they had accumulated their capital. So that was the bait for the trap. They won't acknowledge anyway, the Wikipedia is just so skewed. It's like so many things in the world, and Vermont just doesn't get its hasn't gotten its due in history, even though it was entirely pivotal, and the United States owes Vermont a debt for its entire existence, and we'll see if that's ever repaid. But that is the end of part 3. Take care. So a quick addendum to part 3 of just filling in some gaps that I forgot is that after capturing Ticonderoga, which was in either 1775 or 1776. I think 75. Ethan Allen later attempted an even more daring ambush assault, trying to take the entire city of Montreal, or at least the garrison there, with a force of, I think he had less than 100 people, of Green Mountain Boys. And he was supposed to work with, there was like another unit or something. They were supposed to coordinate this assault from both sides of the city and sneak up, and it could have been an epic victory similar to Ticonderoga, but the forces got split up. The other one got noticed or diverted, and then the enemies got alerted, and basically Ethan Allen got captured by the British. Some of the Green Mountain Boys escaped, but it was a failed plot to surprise and capture Montreal. And then Ethan Allen sat in prison for over 3 years, military prison, as a result of he got captured at that raid. And then and so one kind of symbolic thing about that is that Montreal is not part of Vermont. So Montreal is in the St. Lawrence River basin. So it's outside of the country of Vermont. So it wouldn't have been right for him to win, or for the Vermonters to win a battle outside of Vermont, because that would be aggression as opposed to defending the homeland. The second addendum is that victory at Saratoga demonstrated the Saratoga campaign, they call it, because the next battle after Bennington, after the British had basically lost their supply lines, they were demoralized, they had just gotten completely surprised, they lost all their Indian allies, they were getting defeated by these countrymen and militia that they didn't expect, and their entire strategy had fallen apart, and their supply lines were down, and then they were able to be basically cut off and then surrounded, captured. I didn't actually look into that whole Saratoga battle, the next part, that much of how the rest of the army got captured. But the result of that Saratoga campaign, which was I guess 1 victory and 2 losses for the British, because they took Philadelphia, but then they lost the assault from the west, which wasn't all that significant, but they were just the assault was blunted. But then the main invasion force was just completely destroyed, essentially, and not only destroyed but captured all of the. So that's a big negative, and so that led to the French joining in on the side of the Continentals, even though the French had already provided assistance, and there were a number of officers that had been or were French, like Lafayette, helping the Continentals. The French took a bold step of supporting the Continentals in their Revolutionary War after that victory at Saratoga. So it just shows the domino effect that was set off by Vermont that led to the United States even existing at all. And I think that's the last part that I have to add. So I'll just video edit that onto the last one.